who were like-minded. And what I found right away was I needed to communicate with the younger officers. The older officers, they had grown old in their ways. They were not going to change. They were not. It was difficult because, as you know, Chief, in the world of law enforcement, it's kind of a generational thing from one family to the next family. And so you had to change the minds of even some of the younger officers.
Sure.
But to do that, I had to get the community to change their mind. And that was not easy to do because at that time, Prince George's County, there was a lot of development going on, a lot of houses being built, a lot of new businesses coming in. And so you had a mixture of old-time Prince Georgians versus the newcomers. The old-timers, those who lived here for a while, the truth is they were comfortable with what was. It was almost like you here in the South, we know our place, we stay in our place. But for the new generation coming in, that didn't settle well with them at all.
Wow.
But it was a matter of the police department understanding things are going to change. These people want a nice place to live. They don't want the shiny penny. They want a quarter. That's what it was really all about.
Sure.
And so for me, and when I say to you, I don't know how I got into this, my wife would tell you the same thing.
Sure.
I found myself talking to people about the nature of police work, what they should expect from their police officers. But I also found myself saying to neighbors, you too have a part to play in this because it has to be a two-way street.
Sure.
What I found was the younger officers, those officers with 5, 6, 7 years, they could appreciate that. Because we do have great police officers.
Absolutely.
And so they began to talk to me. And they began to ask me the questions you're asking to some degree. What did I think about living in Prince George's County? And what did I think that they had done so wrong? You know, the truth was this. Many of these officers did not really realize how bad things had been. They did not know it. But they began to appreciate a community that wanted to see change. Because what's the truth, Chief? Nobody wants to go to work and got to work hard all day long.
Sure.
Okay? So I began to forge a relationship with the police district I lived in. I had to practice what I preached. I had to show the neighbors that I was just not talking.
Sure.
I accepted the position, I'll call it, of being an advisor for the Law Enforcement Explorer Group.
Okay.
And that allowed me to be inside of the station and around a number of police officers at any given time.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions because that's you brought up some interesting things. When you finally were able to gain some trust, not only inside the department but outside the department, what was one of the first things that you did along with your neighborhood that was directly connected to the quality of life improvement, reduction in crime? What were one of your initial events or programs that you did?
It was hard work. I think to try to answer that question, of course, you would remember that everybody talked about the Neighborhood Watch.
Sure.
And so with different community groups, what I began to say to them was, neighbors, you need to start watching yourselves.
So self-policing, if you will.
You need to begin to police your own communities.
Okay. And
so you should depend on the police to enforce the law. Now, that initially was difficult to do. I'll try to
Sure.
give you an example. There was the young boys hanging on the corner. You know, that's not uncommon. And neighbors would constantly call the police over and over again, but the neighbors never did anything. They took the position of we are afraid of them for no reason at all. So I put together a gardening club, believe it or not. And I said to the neighbors, we're going to go to that corner with some shovels and some picks and some flowers and some mulch. And we're going to dress that corner up. Because we're going to show that the corner belongs to the community. It was a gamble, but I'd seen it work before. And the neighbors felt good. They felt good about doing something. When it was over and done, they not only felt good that they came out and did something, but they actually liked the way the corner looked. And the young boys who hung there, they also showed their appreciation. So
Sure.
then we moved on and we began to practice something that's kind of controversial, the fixing broken windows theory.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got a group of everyday neighbors, young and old, Chief. I emphasize that, young and old, because one of the things I had to do was I had to get the older residents to understand this is a new Prince George's County.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make room for these young people who are moving in here. They want to be a part of what's going on.
Sure.
You all have to show that you have a united front.
Mm-hmm.
So we began to walk our neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have to knock on some of our neighbors' doors and say to them, listen, you can do something about the way your lawn looks. Or you can get some of these junk cars out of your driveway.
Sure.
We would say to some neighbors, you all have humongous backyards. Can you get your children to play and entertain out back instead of in the front on the sidewalk? Now, this was not easy to do. I don't need to tell you. We went up against people who talked to us about how much mortgage they paid and how long they lived there.
Sure.
And you have to strike a balance. You have to let them know, I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I'm trying to make what you have serve you better.
Sure. So let me ask you this. When you look at some of the communities, and we'll look at, and I know you have some different cultural dynamics going on in cities across the country, but at the end of the day, most people want to come home to a peaceful community. They want to be able to get along with their neighbors and so forth. So as you look around the country at other cities, and let's just look right down the street in Baltimore, for example, if you were in one of those challenged communities there, what would be your recommendation if people asked you your opinion to say, look, this is how you can at least get the process going towards a better relationship with law enforcement so that together we can move forward to make this community better? What would be the number one thing you would recommend, Mr. Lee?
So let me try to respond this way. I don't need to tell you dynamics are different. Things are different. Cultures are different. In Baltimore, and I go to Baltimore, all of my doctors are at Hopkins. And whenever I go to Baltimore, I look around and I do ask that same question, what would I do if I lived here?
Sure.
I really would like to believe that if I could talk to the people, I know it's not easy. Nothing's easy about this. But if I could let them know that they have to get to a point where their communities will not be defined by crime. There are things here that you all can do. You all don't have to look like an eyesore. Now, understand something, and a lot of people get upset with me, but sometimes we bring problems on our own self. In Baltimore, I would say to some of them, listen, if you want to drink and nobody has a problem with that, But do you have to walk up and down my street drinking? So let's have an understanding. Don't give the police a reason to respond to you. This is what you have to do. Your children, you have to talk and communicate with your children. Chief, there's nothing easy about this. I want you to know this, man. I maybe saying this makes it sound a lot easier than it is. It's not easy. But you have to get people to take pride in where they live at, because that's the one thing that police agencies respond to. They know communities where people have pride in where they live. And it doesn't have to be $500,000 homes. It can be $50,000 homes. But police understand when communities have pride in where they live at. And this is what I would try to instill in those people in Baltimore. I think a lot of the problem with places like Baltimore, and to some degree Prince George's County wasn't a lot different. Things have gone wrong for so long, it is hard to correct them. I don't really know how you change the culture of the people or the police, but I think they both have to change together. Let me tell you this, Mel, and when I did it here, a lot of people thought I'd lost my mind. Chief, I actually got police officers to come out with us some Saturdays and clean up the streets.
Sure.
You understand? And when you have police officers, again, who understand what you're trying to do, and that's going to make life easier for them, they don't mind doing it. They don't. Yes. And I'm living proof of that. You have to get police officers and community people to stand side by side and say to each other, we can do better than this. So when you ask me about Baltimore, again, the dynamics are different. I will tell you, Prince George's County was not an easy rock to crack.
Wow.
When you ask me some of the things I did, one of the things that you very well know I did, I was instrumental in establishing the first community service area office. And for your listeners, that's basically an office in the community where police and residents work together. It was the first time, and it was established in a shopping plaza. So everybody who walked by going to the grocery store or hair salon or to the Lowe's, they could see that this was an operation for people to work together. It was not a satellite station. Now, it wasn't a place for just the police, but on that note, I'll tell you, I had issues, as you very well know, Chief, with some officers who didn't want to be in there. But they let me know who they were, and that was important. That part was important. But
sure.
People saw community and police actually working together. And I will tell you this, there were a lot of rookies who grew up in that office. So they grew up with a different kind of mentality. They didn't grow up with that mentality of us against them. They grew up understanding this community has pride in itself. They enjoyed working there. But the community also enjoyed seeing police officers who acted like people. This was one of I think, the best things that happened here in Prince George's County.
Sure. Well,
but it was not accepted by everybody.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, then there was quite a bit of resistance, as I think you were about to lead into. But before we get to that point, because you did a lot of things, and the police department did a lot of things, and the community did a lot of things to sort of turn the battleship around, if you will. And I know that as we were discussing, there's so many communities that are trying to figure out, do we really trust these guys, or should we try to do our own thing? But before we do that, we're going to take one more commercial break and come back, and then we want to hear how you started to build that trust and working on some different things. So keep it locked. We'll be right back.
Straight No Chaser Talk Radio. Other shows water down the issues. We only serve the hard stuff.